Pilate was talking about something political. Jesus was talking about something spiritual. They were speaking what? Two different languages semantically. Believers, beware. You may be in a conversation where you're speaking a different language than the person you're trying to talk to. But then, secondly, for those of you who take notes, there was no communication going on in this conversation, number two, because they were living in two different worlds. Not only speaking two different languages, but living in two different worlds. Jesus was born in a barn, and Pilate lived in a palace. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus was born in poverty. Pilate was born in luxury. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus walked the dusty roads of Galilee with the poor and those in need flocking to him. Pilate rode in a chariot with armed guards all around him. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus changed lives. Pilate changed uniforms. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus gave hope. Pilate gave orders. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus fed the multitude. The multitude feared Pilate. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus was surrounded by the saved. Pilate was surrounded by soldiers. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus was the Prince of Peace, and Pilate was a man of war. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus was a man of prayer. Pilate was a man of political power. They lived in two different worlds. Jesus was the Son of God. Pilate was the servant of a government. They lived in two different worlds. Pilate spoke on behalf of an oppressive government. Jesus spoke on behalf of an omniscient God. They lived in two different worlds. Pilate represented an occupying government. Jesus represented an omnipresent God. They lived in two different worlds. Pilate spoke as the regional representative of an opulent government. Jesus spoke as the only begotten Son of an omnipotent God. They lived in two different worlds. Pilate commanded the Roman legions. Jesus could have called 10,000 angels. They lived, I'm telling you, in two different worlds. It is hard to communicate with a non-believer who does not live in or know your world. Let me tell you something. There are politicians right now who are making decisions about your life, your future, your family, and your children. And the real tragedy is they live in a different world from your world altogether. There are people in power who have opinions about you based on their privilege of skin color. I'm in the text. Pilate was European. Jesus was not European. You got some Negroes in Savannah who think they're better than the folk who are poor in a different world. People live in a world in politics shaped by European standards of beauty, Monahan studies, and bell curve. In Savannah, you still got Negroes walking around talking about she got good hair. Shaped by European standards. They are ignorant and arrogant, and some of them are graduates of Harvard and Yale, and they are setting policies for you based on the stupidity of David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Thomas Jefferson, a pedophile, Thomas Theodore Roosevelt, and a racist Supreme Court. These are the people making policy. The ignorance and the arrogance of white supremacy have the shapers and movers of world policy living in a different world from your world and people of color all together. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you're going to be.